Chapter 1. Woe and Apophenia. There is in everyone divine power existing in latent condition. This is one power divided above and below, generating itself, making itself grow, seeking itself, finding itself, being mother of itself, father of itself, sister of itself, spouse of itself, daughter of itself, son of itself. Unity being a source of the entire circle of existence. Hippolytus. According to Klaus Conrad, apophenia is more or less the act of seeing patterns or connections in random and meaningless data. It is usually attributed to the oversensitivity of the brain in oftentimes healthy individuals. So the act of one's daily life becoming or showing signs of synchronicity could be placed in this category. I also think the science of studying fractals falls in line as well. A fractal is the detection of a pattern or form in something thought to be fluid or formless. A good example is that of the foam from a breaking ocean wave. Could you imagine trying to connect the dots of a breaking wave into a reoccurring pattern? Fractals tend to be a smaller version of the thing in which they belong, so the microcosmic version of a breaking wave is found in the macrocosmic wave itself. Woe is the resentment or grief or regretful feeling that we all feel at times. Like when you find yourself questioning what you're going to do with your life. I often think that the woeful feeling is overcome by the act of apophenia in one's life. The feeling of a pattern and an order gives us meaning in our lives. On the other hand, we know all too well the people who stretch their limited ideas into a metaphysical connection that just isn't there. These people are in line with the egocentric grasping of trying to fit in and feel important. I think we all do it sometimes. The terrible thing is when these desperate graspers try to sell it to you, how dishonest and low they become. Nonetheless, synchronous energy plays a powerful role in our awareness. It links us to our path in life. It is, however, often difficult to detect accurately. People in different locations often report having the same psychic or paranormal experiences, or they play a role in the same dream at the same time. These types of events are actually very common, but are overlooked or just hidden. How many times have you been thinking of someone intensely, and then a few minutes later the phone rings, and there they are? These types of things are acts of synchronicity. When my older brother was born, my grandmother made a phone call to the hospital in Montreal. When she reached my mother on the line, she said, "It's a boy." This occurred without her even knowing that my mother was even in labor. Grandma just intuitively knew a newborn baby boy was here. I often think that the major events in our lives are much more apophenic than we know. The births, deaths, tragedies, breakups, accidents, sicknesses, jobs, vacations are all sort of small signs along the path of life to put us through the experiences we need to become more self-aware. These signposts will ultimately teach us key points that we as individual souls need in order to become more evolved and enlightened. I once was in Ireland with my brother near the small town of Navan. We were visiting the family of our close friend Seamus. His father, James McGough, drove us around at high RPMs in his 3-cylinder car. We were having a blast. These are some of the best friends and best people I've ever met. We went to the Round Tower, and then to the River Boyne, and then to a place called Slane Castle. When we arrived, the castle was closed, and we parked just across the street because we couldn't drive in. The castle has a high stone gate at the drive-in entrance. The gate is so large that you can't see over it without climbing up a little to grab the iron bars and peek over. We pulled up and knew immediately it was closed, but as we walked toward the front gate, I was sent to another place in my mind. I went to a dream state, like a deja vu kind of feeling. I knew already what I was about to see. I had dreamt years before of the place I was now standing in. I didn't know it was a real place until this moment, but the dream I had was vivid, and like most of my dreams, very lucid. So as I was walking, I paused, and this dream came rushing back to me in all its fine details. I could sense the event unfolding just before it happened. I told myself about the vista that I was about to gaze upon just before I climbed up the stone wall gate. Sure enough, I was right. I'd seen this castle before in my dream. There was only one thing missing, a small river or creek on the left side of the castle. I didn't see it, but in my dream it was apparent. It was surely there. I looked for a while and asked James if he thought there might be a creek down there. He pondered and mapped out the area in his head, then said, "Yes, it should flow through the property, somewhere down there." I looked more intently, and then eventually could see in the distance a spot where the thick trees were hanging out over a small pool of water. My confirmation was here. The creek was there, just hidden by the dense growth of trees hanging, branched out over the creek. I knew at that moment that something synchronistic was happening. I felt I was in the exact place in the world and in my life that I was supposed to be. A small sense of peace and freedom followed me through the rest of my stay on the Emerald Isle. The human eye is the mother of distance. It is a startling truth that how you see and what you see determine how and who you will be. John O'Donohue. The point here is to never forget the mystery and wonder of the place where we live and the life we live. It is so apparent when we stop and just relax for a moment and think of all the things we have witnessed, the routine things we do every day, the countries and the people we encounter. The life we have is incredible. Sitting still, I see a plant or a bird or the wind in the trees, and I am reminded of how wild this life is. I just get on a plane, and hours later, I am across the world visiting another country where people live in a completely different way. It is the mind that creates want and fulfills it. Yogananda. There is some sort of synchronous pattern to all our lives, and I know that the more attuned we are to these little events, the more grounded we become, and the more our lives have meaning. We must be going somewhere, or evolution wouldn't even exist, since it does, and we see it all around us in all species. We get the feeling that there is meaning and purpose driving us to evolve and become better. Yes, some progressive evolution is violent and cutthroat, but all of nature has both creative and destructive qualities. We are always becoming and always renewing. This is why we intuitively know each and every one of our lives has meaning. Never forget the wonder of the world. It is where two come together that one exists. The razor's edge sharpens bliss. None can create it, nor can they destroy, but all can transfigure it. From it we are born. The razor's edge is sharp and still, it can always cut. Its will and yours are the same, open or shut. Catching the wind is the essence, and it is the dream. Both are leading while following. Though we try to find the questions to all the answers we display, it would still be the same if said the other way. Liberate the heart and mind by living through the soul. We can make the slope a mountain. Don't choose to make it a hole. The Old Man River is eternally flowing wet, even on the edges in which he beset. Though he rises to cool the air, go back to the riverbed, and he is always there. The overall message in all of this is one of self-discovery, which is something we are constantly embarking on naturally. The difficult part of the process is that it is you yourself discovering you yourself, which means that the process is subjective. There is no way around it. You are all that you have to detect yourself. This entire book is predicated upon the idea that consciousness is the ground of being. The tool used to quantify consciousness is consciousness itself. So then again, it is a subjective process. It is not a product or process of the brain. It is the source of our reality, world, and experience. Many sciences are aiming to prove that consciousness is in fact a secretion of the brain, and if we gather enough information about the brain function, then we will understand consciousness. However, the fallacy with this approach is that it is still detected by a human being using their consciousness, which again is completely subjective. Many ancient teachings and philosophies maintain that the only way to understand consciousness is to understand thyself. Ancient sages have said that consciousness is the ground of being, simply because it connects all of creation and all of life. So, to take it a step further, we do not create creation, but creation creates us. Or we do not create consciousness, but consciousness creates us. We learn of ourselves by ourselves, which is why we all possess the power to will ourselves to a higher state of consciousness. The process of doing so is to love oneself, and the treasure of righteousness is love.